Supra, Skyline, RX-7. The JDM heroes of the 90s are pretty much universally loved, and they're also really freaking expensive. So what do you do if you want to experience the best, but you only have a bento box sized budget to work with? Well, stay tuned, because I'm about to show you 9 super cool, super rare JDM cars that can be tuned to the moon that don't cost a fortune like that Mark IV Supra that you've had your eyes on. What's up, Ideal fam? I'm the Squid, this is Ideal Cars. Subscribe down below and let's get into the most fun, most affordable JDM sports cars you can buy right now. Let's go. If you're watching this from the United States of America, you're in luck. Thanks to the 25-year-old import rule, we here in the States are finally able to get our hands on some of Japan's most beloved cars from their golden age. I really wish they had shared this first car with us here stateside because it is absolutely one of the most fun cars I've ever seen. It's called the Nissan PULSAR and it comes in a few different configurations. You can get it as a coupe, a small sedan, or a 5-door hatchback. But you don't want any of those. No, you want the 3-door hatchback, otherwise known as the GTI R, because under its hood, you're packing the legendary SR20 DET. That's right, this is basically a hatchback Nissan Silvia. You see, the PULSAR GTI R was built for rally racing, and it is legitimately fast even when it's stock. They're also kind of a handful to drive thanks to their short wheelbase, lightweight, and a good amount of horsepower. Those 3 ingredients mean that the PULSAR GTI R is totally awesome and I totally want one. You want one too. And good news, unlike the Silvias and the R32s of the same era, the GTI R is kind of still unknown. And so you can still get one for under 15 grand. That's right, for the same price of an old Civic EK, you can own a hyper hatch that has an engine that can be tuned to absolute insane horsepower numbers. The bad news is Pulsar GTI-Rs are still kind of obscure. They're not really well known outside of Japan. I was able to find one for sale here in the States, street legal, for around 18,000 bucks. So you could either get like a slightly used WRX and look like everyone else, or be piloting a rally car sleeper that just no one understands and has never seen stateside. I think it's a pretty obvious choice which one I'd go for. Now up next is a really, really good looking car. I think right up there along the lines of the FD-RX-7. I'm talking about the Mitsubishi FTO. FTO must stand for fun to operate because everyone can't stop raving about how fun these are to drive. Heck, it even got the title of Car of the Year when it debuted in 1994. And in the mid-2000s, Auto Trader Britain called it the best used sports car. That's some pretty high praises for a front-wheel drive car. Now, I know, you guys can argue in the comments about whether a front-wheel drive hardtop can be an actual sports car, but what you can't deny is it's actually a pretty good-looking car, offered with 3 different engines, which all you need to know is you're going to want the Myvec engine that comes close to 200 horsepower out the gate, and that came in the GP and the GXP versions of the FTO. We did get the Starion, which is kind of like the FTO's precursor, but the fresh touring origination, otherwise known as the FTO, never made it stateside. Either way, thanks to that 25-year-old import rule, you can get them now in the States. And they're pretty damn cheap, like under 10K if you go for the weaker pre-facelift FTOs. But if you want the ideal FTO, a GXP made after 1997 with a 5-speed, you're still looking at around 16 grand delivered to the good old USA. And then, you know, having to wait until next year to make it road legal. Okay, I know, you need rear-wheel drive, don't we all? And of course, you're looking at Japanese cars, you want rear-wheel drive, you're thinking Supra. Well, guess what? You can't afford it. How about the next best thing? Well, let me introduce you to my friend, the Toyota SOARER, which may look pretty familiar to some of you. We did kind of get the Toyota SOARER here in the States. We got the 3rd generation and we called it a Lexus SC300. And don't get me wrong, it's a great car, just ask Tavares. But the one you want is the actual JDM genuine article. Because unlike the American SC300 and SC400, the JDM SOARER came with the 1JZ GTE, which is a twin turbo power plant coupled with a manual transmission. It's the same motor in the Mark III Supra. Now officially, it made 279 horsepower, but so did every other 90s Japanese car. And that's thanks to the gentleman's agreement of the time, which is a whole video on its own. We can get into that in another video. Let us know down below if you'd like to see that video. But back to the SOARER, and more specifically that 1JZ that powers it. Sure, it isn't the absolute monster that the 2JZ GTE is, but it still packs plenty of potential that you'll likely never hit the limits of. And the best part is people are still totally sleeping on the SOARER in the tuning scene, meaning you can get one for as little as 9 grand. Of course, good examples going from anywhere from 10 to 15. You're still talking about an insanely fun car with a lot of potential for really cheap. It's basically a low budget Supra. Now, how else do you get Supra performance without Supra prices? Well, you just buy one of its competitors, like the 300ZX. We here on Ideal Cars talk a lot about Nissan Zs, and that's because they're awesome. The 350Z today is still one of the best sports car values out there, period. But its older siblings, the Z31 and the Z32, have aged like fine wine. And a younger squid actually owned a Z32. Sitting in the interior is like sitting in a fighter jet. Now sure, you could just buy a USDM 300ZX twin turbo and be done with it. But this is a list of JDM heroes, and we know you want to impress your friends by having to go backwards through a drive-thru. And thankfully, if you want the right-hand drive model of the Z32, you're actually going to save yourself a couple of bucks, because they're cheaper to import than they are to buy here in the States with left-hand drive. For example, I was able to find a Slushbox twin turbo for under 8,000 bucks. But with the prices of Z32s with a 5-speed here in the States skyrocketing right now, not a bad proposition. That's because it's kind of the sweet spot between it's too expensive to import and all those rare Japanese cars that are more than you can afford, pal. Which includes the next car on our list, and it's one of my favorites. An all-wheel drive lightweight rally car with serious pedigree. And guess what? It's not a frickin' Subaru. It's the Toyota Celica GT4. Stateside, we only got the slow, front-wheel drive, boring version of the Toyota Celica. But outside of the US, there was the legendary Toyota Celica GT4. And the Celica GT4 is no Type R wannabe. It is an insane, fire-breathing rally car, complete with everything you need to be that. All-wheel drive and a big old turbo under the hood. It was also a WRC winner and sports one of the coolest front ends ever with those 4 rally-esque style headlights in the front. I mean, it's just insane how fun Toyota was back in the 80s and 90s before they got watered down by the beige Corolla. The great news is that the ST205 generation of the Celica GT4 is now available for import in the States. Just act quick because they're still around 15 grand right now, and I get the feeling that these are going to skyrocket in value. All right. $20,000 Celicas, not cheap yet, right? You need something that's really cheap. Well, first of all, you should check out the Ideal Car strategies to get the most bang for your buck every time, no matter what car you're buying. And second of all, if you want to get the cheap car from the JDM Horsepower Wars, you go with the loser, and that's the Mitsubishi GTO. You have 2 options when considering the quirky, but actually pretty beautiful Mitsubishi GTO. You can import an authentic Mitsubishi GTO and get that street cred. But this is one of the few times I'm going to recommend you look stateside and get the US market version, otherwise known as the 3000 GT VR4, and that's because here in the States, these things are pretty damn cheap. Here in the States, the Mitsubishi GTO went under 2 names, the Mitsubishi 3000 GT VR4 and the Dodge Stealth. Gray imports are a really fun topic, and I would love to cover that in another video. Let me know down below if you'd like to see that. Just for now, know that a lot of cars labeled as Dodges in the 80s and 90s were actually Mitsubishis. None of that matters though. What matters is that if you're not afraid of getting your hands dirty, cramming your way into the complex engine bay of the VR4, you can pick up a running one with a few problems for under 10 grand. Or if you have to have that right-hand drive, there are great examples coming out of Japan for around 15,000 bucks right now. It is the loser of the JDM Horsepower Wars, but it's still a car that stood toe-to-toe with the Z32 and the Supra. Just, know what you're getting involved with. There's a special place in hell for whoever designed the engine bay in the 3000 GT. These are some of the most difficult cars to work on the planet, but if you have the will and money and time and thick skin to be able to work on one, I think it would be really rewarding. Now, did you know that Subaru made their own speed wedge? It's called the Subaru SVX. I think they look awesome. The continuous glass cockpit is supposed to make it look like a fighter jet. And the problem with the SVX, otherwise known as the Alcyone, are that it wasn't fast, and the biggest automotive sin of all is there was no manual option. So yeah, it's pretty easy to see why the SVX was left in the dust, but it does make a really good modding platform. And even better yet, they're dirt cheap. You can get a good one for between 5 and 10 grand. And they just have so much curb appeal. Everywhere you go, somebody's gonna ask you about your weird ass Subaru. Now, moving on to our next car, have you ever looked at a Miata and thought, that's cool, but could it be smaller? Well, good news, somebody at Suzuki did think that, and they churned out the Suzuki Cappuccino. Like the AutoZone AZ1 and the Honda Beat, the Suzuki Cappuccino is a K car, but unlike most of the boring K cars, the Cappuccino came turbocharged with a front mid-engine layout and rear-wheel drive. This is a tiny little sports car, and when we say tiny, I mean seriously tiny, and thankfully, one of the world's tiniest, cutest little sports cars cars has one of the tiniest, cutest little price tags. You can pick these up for between $7,000 and $10,000 pretty much all day, which yes, is about the same price as the bigger Miata, but I mean, is the Miata even cute anymore in comparison? All right, after that cute little shot of espresso, I'm thinking you're probably wanting to hear about something a little more powerful, a little more roomy, and something a lot more fun to drive. Well, then you, my friend, might want to consider yourself the A31 CEFIRO. The second generation CEFIRO has all of the right numbers and letters. RB20 DET, 5-speed manual, rear wheel or all-wheel drive, all in a super convenient, super luxurious, super roomy 4-door layout. Now, of course, this being kind of like a Skyline, you have to be careful when shopping for one, because like the Skyline, there's about 40 different variations. If you're not paying attention, you'll end up buying a little 4-cylinder automatic transmission boring car. You definitely don't want to buy one made after 1994 because that's when they became the front-wheel drive Maxima. Now, the best part about the A31 CEFIRO is unlike the R32 of the same time, which sells for, 40 or 50 grand now, you can get the A31 CEFIRO for around 10 grand. And you absolutely should get one if you're getting into drifting. It costs you about 20 grand to get a proper S14 sorted and ready to drift. Meanwhile, for half the price, you and all your friends are drifting by in luxury. So there you have it, a bunch of really cool Japanese cars that maybe most of you weren't thinking about. Which forgotten JDM legend do you want to own? Let me know down below. For me, it's probably that Cappuccino. Parking in Seattle is pretty hard in my Lexus. Also, let us know which cars we forgot. You guys always have the best ideas. Did we forget the Cressida or an OG Lancer? Let us know. Either way, this has been Ideal Cars. I'm the Squid. Like, subscribe, turn on the bell, buy a shirt, do whatever you gotta do to support us because we're gonna bring you content pretty much every other day so that you, me, your mom, everyone in Japan, everyone in Germany can keep living the ideal lifestyle.